Princess of Wales returned to the world stage this morning. This was Kate's first overseas trip since recovering from cancer, and she was traveling alone. A sort of study journey where she learns about a cause that is very important to her. Where people are hanging out the windows, thousands of people have practiced. Here, you may witness her interacting with some of her youngest. A sentence uttered in a secured palace room 7 minutes ago broke months of anxiety. The medical team regarded Princess Catherine's recovery as extraordinary, and her doctor confirmed this. William didn't start celebrating right away. He begged the doctor to repeat the words while lowering his head and holding on to the table's edge. The unthinkable has suddenly come true for a family that was ready for any eventuality. However, the announcement had unanticipated repercussions. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. Catherine observed as the physician moved the medical report across the table. In order to make sure that hope had not surpassed certainty, the document underwent independent assessments. The future king's wife, the Princess of Wales, was supposed to stand next to the throne, but she had been away from public duty for months, leaving her children uneasy. The palace knew how much depended on her strength. The family might have been destroyed twice by a single hasty vow. William continued to stare at the report, but the prince was unable to touch it. The doctor clarified that there was no imminent indication of the danger that had placed Catherine under medical observation based on the most recent testing. He provided the confirmation by presenting the findings to them during a recorded private consultation. She didn't smile, though. In a voice that was nearly inaudible, she posed one inquiry. Could she at last convince Louis, Charlotte, and George that the worst was behind her? The physician gave a thoughtful response. Her recuperation was remarkable, but mending would still require tolerance, restraint, and protection from fatigue. Knowing the price of false certainty, Catherine nodded. She had been aware for a few days that the results were promising, but she didn't notify Charles or the kids until the senior doctor made a clear assessment. She refused to provide relief that would eventually crumble, and the king bore personal anxiety. With shaking hands, William picked up the summary, reread the pivotal sentence, and put it down. With the exception of this one, he had spent months planning for every scenario. Before she could say anything, he got up and moved into the hallway, while Catherine reached over the table. He had the seclusion that the consulting room had denied him thanks to the closed door. He lost his cool as she followed and put her hand inside his. Peace had not come, but relief had. Catherine's return would rekindle anxieties that George, Charlotte, Louis, Charles, and William had never expressed. One conflict was ended by the doctor's remarks. However, as word spread throughout the royal family, it revealed the personal scars that each member had concealed while she was away. What the sickness had already taken was not erased by recovery. William had carried the burdens of parenting, national responsibility, and personal terror behind closed doors, without disclosing which burden was the most painful. George was now quieter. Every whispered exchange had been observed by Charlotte. Louis had persisted in posing queries that no adult could securely respond to. Catherine was coming back to them now. But the thought that she might not had altered the household she was returning to. William had mastered the art of breaking each day down into smaller parts. The prince took private medical calls, hurried back for school, attended royal engagements, and stayed up late after the kids had gone to bed. Official tasks performed on behalf of the crown were known as royal engagements. To him, however, they had turned into hours of acting as though nothing had changed. One dreadful idea was concealed in every public smile. One day, he could have to raise Louis, Charlotte, and George without the lady who kept their house together. The 3 kids were waiting when Catherine cautiously made her way into the sitting room. When she told them that the doctor thought her recovery had beyond all expectations, even though she had practiced the words, her voice still trembled. The young heir had spent months attempting to look older than he actually was, so George fought back tears as he glanced at the ground. Then he came across the room, put his arms around her, and confessed that he had been too scared to inquire as to whether she would ever resume her public life. At first, Charlotte did not move. Her face softened with relief, but fury soon followed. The princess had observed abrupt schedule changes, heard fragments through closed doors, and saw grown-ups suppress their voices whenever she came in. Silence had not shielded her, she informed Catherine. It had made her think of something worse. While Louis posed the most straightforward inquiry of all, her mother drew her in and apologized. Would she still have to go missing for days at a time? Before fear might return, William responded. He assured the youngest child that their family would not be sacrificed in order to return to royal duties. He cautioned Catherine that the public would demand more when the kids had departed. She listened as soon as the recovery was announced, and the future monarch stated his stance. Celebration could not turn into yet another kind of coercion. Charles didn't say anything for a few seconds after hearing the news via a recorded call from the doctor. The king was relieved to have a father-in-law, but he also recognized the implications of her recovery for the future of the monarchy. Catherine wasn't just going back to her family. Already carrying uncertainty, she was bringing stability back to a royal house. But the worst worry had started long before the diagnosis. A few months prior, Catherine had reached for a chair, stumbled, and fallen just before a private family get-together. The family had to go back to the time when optimism gave way to fear in order to comprehend why the doctor's confirmation felt like a miracle. There had been no official proclamation or well-crafted palace statement to start the crisis. Catherine halted in the middle of a conversation, grasped for the back of a chair, and abruptly lost her footing at a private rehearsal for a royal charity banquet. Before anyone else realized what was going on, William moved across the room. The doors were locked. The music halted, and in a matter of minutes, saving one woman had taken precedence over the monarchy's destiny. The pages fell out of Catherine's hand while she was clutching prepared comments for a significant Windsor charity reception. The moment she fell next to the table, the event's intended purpose, supporting organizations that assist vulnerable families, vanished. As an assistant called for the medical team, William fell on his knees and cried her name. When Anne arrived at the door first, she gave the order for everyone who wasn't needed to leave the room. Even though her hands started to tremble, the Princess Royal, the monarch's sister and one of the family's most senior working members, maintained her composure. William put one hand on Catherine's shoulder and pleaded with her to remain motionless. She didn't question what had happened when she opened her eyes. She wanted to know if Louis, Charlotte, or George had witnessed her fall. Because it exposed the true source of her dread, the inquiry pierced harder than the silence surrounding them. She was not considering the crown, the palace, or the reception. 3 kids who had already recognized that something wasn't right were on her mind. Until the medics arrived, Anne stayed by their side. She managed the space, diverted terrified employees, and stopped panic from spreading into the hallways. However, the Princess Royal held onto the back of the same chair and bowed her head as soon as Catherine was removed. It was the first time William saw it. He realized that even the family's strongest member thought the threat might be genuine. Everything was altered by the initial medical briefing. Before the palace recognized any health issues, doctors used language in a written consultation that was serious enough for William to cancel multiple events. Catherine had put off prior exams, attributing her weariness to a rigorous schedule, parenthood, and public pressure. That choice now held a horrible burden. Charles was similarly held in the darkest possibilities by Catherine. She was concerned because the king was already dealing with his own health issues and constitutional obligations, which are the official tasks that the ruler must perform in order to maintain the state. Silence, she thought, would keep him safe. Rather, it made everyone feel alone. Every appointment, family meal, and public appearance revolved around her treatment after that night. The point of no return was reached after the collapse. William would later learn that she had also concealed earlier symptoms from him. The news of the recovery was comforting. However, they had to face the secrecy that almost left him unprepared for losing her before he could come to terms with it. There were no assistants, advisors, or prepared statements during the argument. In a private room at Windsor, William stood opposite Catherine. He was still holding the folded recovery report. Although he was relieved that she was still alive, he was incensed